Hello, welcome back to Talk of the Bay. I'm your host, PK Haddis. Earlier this month, the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors established its first ever youth commission, which will be tasked with studying how the county can foster greater youth participation in local government so it can share that advice with the elected leaders who can actually make some change. To tell us more about the freshly formed committee, I'm joined now by Elizabeth Padilla, a senior department administrative analyst with the county, and Maria Cadenas, Executive Director of Ventures, a Santa Cruz-based nonprofit that has collaborated with the county in its effort to increase youth representation in places where decisions get made. I'm also happy to say we're joined by a member of the Youth Task Force that recommended the board to create this commission in the first place, Dylan Turk. Elizabeth, Maria, Dylan, thanks so much for coming on Talk of the Bay.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so Elizabeth or Liz, if I may, maybe you could, since you're with the county directly, you could kind of give us kind of the background of this youth commission, how it came to be.
Actually, Maria wanted to kick that off with a little bit of background story on how we even got to the establishment of the task force.
Even better. Maria, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you again for having us. Well, Santa Cruz Like Me really started in a conversation between Ventures and the county back in 2021 to just look at, back in 2025, apologies, to look at how we bring recognition of representative government that was really tied in truth to the strategic direction of the county to ensure diversity of our government was reflected of the diversity of the region. And really was a study of our board and commission demographic makeup as compared to the census information in the county. So we looked at the data that we collected from the current board makeup at the time, compared it to the census data, and identified areas or gaps that we could look at that needed to be worked on. So that work, it's been 5 years now since we started, and it really led to the county looking at the key areas of work, which included South County representation, rental representation, a youth gap, significant youth gap, as well as a gap in just race and ethnicity. From those provisions, the county voted forward to continue this work to ensure that as a representative government that we were looking at structures and processes that would ensure participation of everybody, including youth. And at that time, the county took on the effort of creating a task force that would be youth-led and youth-guided to come back with recommendations that would help address this issue.
Maria, let me ask you one follow-up to what you just shared. So again, you're introducing Santa Cruz Like Me, which is Ventures is a huge partner in creating and fostering that work, which it sounds like is to create greater representation and equity across, all county departments and committees included. So you said that there was a study that helped launch some of this youth-focused work, and I'm wondering if could you tell us what did that report find about youth participation? Like, do you have any hard numbers that you could share with us?
Yeah, back and when we did the first survey, we had no youth representation. Really, that was a critical gap.
And what year? Sorry to interrupt you. What year was that first survey?
The first survey was in 2021. So the report is online if anybody wants to look it up. It was sccvonline.org. And so there were 5 key findings. One of them was the youth gap in terms of the population. So how do we address that as a whole was really the task of the task force. So the age representation from 18 to 24 was 0% at that time. And the census population was close to 14%. So these gaps were kind of really highlighted in that initial survey that led to these conversations.
Great. Thank you so much. I think it's really helpful to have that kind of stark data to set the foundation for this conversation. And so, Liz, if I may bridge it over to you, tell me what the county's role in this is, or put another way, what are commissions? Like, what do they do?
So we have several boards and commissions. So we've got boards and commission members who advise the Board of Supervisors on different policies and program recommendations based on the specific work of that commission. So, for example, our youth commission will be focused all on youth priorities, policies, programs. So anything that affects youth they will now have a direct access to the Board of Supervisors to provide recommendations and feedback to the board on and make real changes to things that impact our youth. During the task force, the youth really wanted a platform where they'd be able to make a difference. They don't want to just, they wanted to be able to impact things and move things forward for youth. And not having a platform to do that, they found that the Youth Commission would be the perfect opportunity to do that.
So the task force was, walk me through that. The task force was formed to do the sort of the legwork in the background to kind of wrap your arms around this issue. Do I have that right?
Right. So we had 24 members on the task force between the ages of 14 to 24 who were tasked with taking a look at how other cities and counties engaged their youth. So they looked at other youth commission models. They looked at potentially adding youth seats to existing boards and commissions, or potentially expanding the supervisors' summer academy that we have. And so after visiting the city of Watsonville, the city of Gilroy, the county of Santa Clara, and watching their youth commissions and actions, they immediately were drawn to wanting a youth commission and having a platform to be able to actually make changes and recommendations on issues that affect youth. So they met for over a period of a year. Aside from visiting cities and counties, they also had a commissioner mentor to talk about their roles as commissioners, so they got to learn a little bit about what our commissioners do and how they serve the community. They got to go and sit in on different commission meetings to see what that environment felt like and see if it's an environment that they felt would be best suited for youth. After doing all of that, they found the Youth Commission is going to be the way that they wanted to move forward with everything. And so we really, in October of 2025 is when they went to the board with the recommendation of forming the Youth Commission. The board accepted it. We just established it. An ordinance got passed on April 14th. We're rolling out the application this week. I mean, we're just excited that after all of the hard work that this task force did, it's actually led to something. Here we are, we're moving forward, and youth will now have a platform and a voice at the table.
So I'm extra stoked that we were able to get Dylan in here, right on cue, because we got to hear from the folks involved in the youth task force, and the youth themselves. So Dylan, maybe if you don't mind, just kind of tell us briefly a bit about yourself and how did you get involved? I mean, we just heard from Maria that like youth participation is incredibly low. I just am curious how you got involved in the task force.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a senior at Scotts Valley High School, and I try and stay as involved in the community as I can because I 100% agree with what Maria and Liz was saying, that having a youth voice in the community is so impactful. And I work with the Rotary Club, and one of my club advisors, Randy Klein, emailed me and he said, I think this would be an awesome opportunity for you. And he sent me the flyer, and I thought, you know what, it's a great way to get involved. Why don't I just apply for fun? And I ended up getting an interview and joining the task force, and it was such an incredible experience, truly.
Can you tell us more about what the task force looked like and kind of like what was the work that you all were engaged in?
Yeah, absolutely. Just like Liz was saying, it was about 24 of us, ages 14 to 24, and it was very collaborative as an environment. We would all sit together at these tables and discuss, okay, what's going on in our community that we feel really strongly about? What's something that we want to change? What's going well? How can we get youth voices out into the community? And once we kind of established what we liked, what we didn't like, how we thought we were going to do this, and visiting all these other cities, we sat down and really broke everything down. We thought, okay, how are we going to get youth involved, right? What ages are we going to do? What's the application process going to look like? What's the term going to be like? What issues do we want to focus on? So it really started from the ground up and got built up. And I think also we had so many guest commissioners come and talk to us about how their commissions runs besides just visiting the other youth commissions. And that was really impactful, seeing how other commissions already existing in our county, whether adult, made, impact. And that was really cool.
Could you also tell us, among your peers, have you heard much from your fellow high schoolers about how much does local government come up in your daily conversations? And do you ever hear folks say, I wish I had a better way to plug in, or is it not much on their radar? I'm curious the status of things.
Yeah, I think that's a good question because I think I've heard both. Obviously in school we talk a lot about local government and how we can get involved, and it's especially becoming an upperclassman and wanting to, before leaving, wanting to be involved with the community and leave a lasting legacy and an impact. And I think you have some kids that are like, how do I get involved? How can I get my name out there? How can I make a difference? And then there's other kids that just don't know how to get involved. And I think that that's the big issue, is why kids aren't getting involved, is because they don't know how. So this platform is a really great way to teach kids how they can actually get involved and show them that they can make a difference, and that really your age doesn't matter. It's just how hard are you willing to work and put in the effort for your community.
Maria, I wanted to invite you back into the conversation if you want to, react at all to what Dylan just said, but I also wanted to pose another question to you, which is just talking more about why representation in local government really matters and how that kind of fits in with a Santa Cruz like me and what Ventures was doing in this effort.
Yeah, thanks for the question. One of the things to think about is that policies create pathways or barriers for the well-being of community. The value of having a government that has representations through different lives and different exposures, whether it be renting or educational level or age, it actually allows for better policy making. It ensures that the solutions being proposed don't continue to other or leave people out, and that we're walking collectively together for the benefit of the community. And I'm proud to say that in 2025, Governor Newsom signed Senate Bill 702, which creates a similar reporting demographic data at the state level, which actually, it was those conversations that started us to think locally how we can look at data as a vehicle for transparency and a vehicle for us to really get to this representative government. And I think to Dylan's comments, I mean, it really, a youth commission is directly addressing not only an opportunity for participation and youth voice, but it goes beyond a symbolic intent to a very explicit action that removes barriers, makes clear a pathway for engagement, and lets youth be the leaders in the future that we want to create in this county. It really is an investment in the future for all of us, because they get to be involved early, build strong leadership among themselves and the community, build trust in government, and really reflect everyone who calls Santa Cruz home.
Great. Thank you so much for that explanation. I wanted to follow up with one more question, because you've been involved in this work for so long, and I'm sure there's some lessons you've learned about creating change and increasing representation from, simple steps, perhaps like maybe simple isn't the right word, but steps like creating a commission like this where folks can have an ear to elected representatives that actually create policy, to, I don't know, throwing events or fundraising efforts or going to the state, going from local all the way up to state leaders. What strategies, in your experience, have proven to be effective or useful in creating this kind of, positive change towards a more representative government?
To me, one of the most key things in creating change is, one, you have to be patient, but you also have to be humble and curious about everybody that's coming to the table. You build the future together in order to have a space where we can all live together. And I know it can sound a little easy, but that is the hardest part, is what I call love as a civic value. How do you create the space to have hard conversations, difficult conversations, the space to compromise and take the small step today and engage different stakeholders as you move it forward? This work that we're seeing in the fruition of this youth commission would not have been possible without the county's leadership being involved, without Liz's partnership. We also had a subgroup with an initiative called Results Count, where we were talking to the city of Watsonville and looking at civic conventions. It was a lot of people trying to thread together what could be possible, and it was all anchored around creating healthier, stronger communities of belonging and welcoming, and then documented and continue to weave those relationships. Change takes time. Changing systems takes time, but so does everything else. And I think the commitment of those who dream what is possible is the first thing, and the consistency to continue forward. Like I said, this work started in 2021 with a demographic survey. It took the commitment of the staff and then the county Board of Supervisors support to keep it rolling. It took 5 years to get to the commission, but here we are. It's an exciting time, And so let's keep it going.
As you said, sometimes government can take a while, but when things happen, they really happen. And that's part of why I was excited to have you three on the show, because we're right at the beginning of something happening. And Liz, it's been a minute since I've been able to get you here on the mic. Before I ask another question, I just wanted to ask any reaction or added context you want to add to what these two have just shared.
No, I just share exactly what Maria and Dylan have shared. This is a really exciting time for youth in our county. This is going to be the first Brown Act committee or youth commission in Santa Cruz County. So they will definitely have the power to make change. And it's exciting. That is really exciting.
So explain to us what you mean by the Brown Act and why that's relevant to sort of the status of this commission.
Yeah, so they're going to serve in an advisory capacity to the Board of Supervisors. So any issues that they bring up, any policy recommendation, changes that they want to see, they will have the ability to go to the board with their recommendations and make proposals for changes. Things that impact them. They could be events, they could be programs, they could be policies. I think so often we're making those decisions without youth at the table. And what a better way of including youth and getting their perspective from the very start on a program or a policy that's going to affect them. They will now have that input at the table from the very beginning.
Excellent. And it does seem like the Board of Supervisors in the county has many commissions. Mm-hmm. And I am sort of surprised that this didn't happen sooner. So I'm curious what your reaction is to that. How do you explain, or put another way, like, were there other opportunities for youth involvement in government that kind of filled this role up until recently? How did it take so long for a commission like this to come into being?
Well, we currently do have 2 commissions, I believe, that have youth seats available. We weren't reaching the youth, though, as effectively. And I think it's a lot as youth don't know how to get involved with local government, right? They don't know that these opportunities exist. So part of the task force was establishing that connection with the youth and local government. They did a lot of outreach. They did surveys. They heard directly from the youth on what they want to see, what the top issues are for them. And so this youth commission is really going to be able to make a change and hopefully engage youth. When we released the application for the task force, we thought we were going to have a hard time filling the 15 seats we originally planned on filling. We got over about 80 applications in less than a month to serve on the task force. So we ended up increasing our size from 15 youth to 24 because we had so many passionate youth wanting to get involved with local government that there was no way we could narrow it down to 15. And so the plan this time around is to have 11 members on the Youth Commission, 5 which will be appointed by the Board of Supervisors, 1 for each of their districts, and then 6 at-large seats, which the task force has designated preference for a person of color, a person with a physical learning disability, a person from a rural or unincorporated area, immigrant farm worker background, somebody who identifies as low income, and a person who identifies as LGBTQ+.
Right. So again, in keeping with this theme of equity and representation for folks in the county. Dylan, back to you here. Tell me a bit about what you hear amongst your peers, but also I wonder what the task force found about what the priorities seem to be for local youth. And when we say local youth, we're basically talking about those 18 and younger, though it sounds like the Youth Commission was largely focused on age groups, kind of high school, maybe 14 to 18. So tell us a bit about what are some of the priorities for your demographic?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Liz kind of hit it right on the button when talking about having so many different people of color or from different backgrounds on the youth task force and why that was important. And I think because so many people come from have different stories to share, right? Everybody's had different experiences. And I think what was cool about the task force when we all came together, that even though we had different experiences, there was a shared collectiveness of like, this is what we want to make better. And I think education was a big one, mental health was a big one, environmental stability was another big one. And I think those were the main issues. I know affordable housing and homelessness was brought up. So stuff that, are government is talking about, but our youth are talking about it too, just maybe on a different level.
That's such an interesting point, actually, and I was sort of arriving at that as you were speaking, because a lot of those issues you just mentioned, I write for the Sentinel in my day job as a reporter, and so I'm hearing a lot about these issues, and so I sort of naturally find the ones that recur over and over. And a lot of the issues you're talking about, homelessness, housing, environmental awareness, those are all like the big issues in Santa Cruz for anyone. And it's interesting to hear you say that, as you put it better than I ever could, right? It's just youth are experiencing it too. Maybe they just don't have a voice at the table. So that's an important realization, I think, that I'm kind of grappling with now.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's so important, and I think what we don't realize is how much it's all interconnected. If a student is struggling with mental health, they're not going to learn well. Or if they're in an environment where they're really struggling at home, how are they going to come to school and have mental health, a positive, learning environment, and keep a positive mental health with everything else going on? So it's all interconnected, and it all leads to having youth grow up with a voice and a very successful future.
Liz, can I ask you again, because we know that the board created this commission earlier this month, and now it kind of kicks off the process of actually forming it. Could you repeat for us again how many members of the commission, and then what's the process? Let's say we have a youth listener listening to the show right now, and they're interested in getting involved. How would they go about doing so?
Yeah, thanks for that. So we are going to have 11 youth commission members. Like I said, 5 will be appointed. Each of the district supervisors will appoint 1 youth to represent their area. We will have 6 at-large seats. We're going to be rolling out the applications on Friday. We will be targeting all of the high schools in Santa Cruz County, much like we did with the task force outreach. So I do direct outreach to the high schools, connect with the counselors, academic teachers in government, and reach out to all of the principals as well. We do social media push. We'll do a website push. We'll do a media release. We work with our local partners, such as Ventures, too, to share their word and get the word out. We know that working with our community partners, most of them have youth commission, well, not necessarily youth commissions, but youth groups that they work with. And so that's a great way for us to get the word out at those various different youth groups. So when we roll it out this Friday, we're going to be targeting all of the different high schools in Santa Cruz County, which I felt last time around with the task force got us the best bang for our buck in terms of getting kids interested. We dropped off flyers, we did emails, and then teachers were connecting youth with all of the information.
I meant to say this when you were talking previously about how quickly the youth task force applications poured in and extended way beyond what you were hoping for, which is significant. I think people should know, because county commissions are sort of famously difficult for supervisors to fill the seats, right? They're always talking about how difficult it is sometimes to find folks to fill these seats, which is important, because if you don't have, they are formal government bodies, and if they don't have quorum, if they don't have enough people attending the meetings, they can't actually do the work. So like you said, it kind of does say something that they just created this task force, and it's like, boom, no problem filling it up.
Yeah.
And I expect they're feeling pretty confident that they'll be able to fill it up for the actual commission itself now.
We already have a lot of interest.
You do?
So we've done some early outreach already at a civic summit that the county held with local high school students. And from that, we've got about 30 students who were already interested in applying for the youth commission.
Right. Well over what is needed.
Yeah.
Maria, back to you. I wanted to ask if there's anything else, other thoughts that you haven't shared yet about the youth commission. I welcome those as well. But I also want to ask you about the Santa Cruz Like Me work, which will continue for years to come. Could you tell us perhaps a little bit more about that work and what issues are you had this big success with the youth commission? What are some other issues that you and your colleagues will be focused on?
Thank you for the question. I think when we look at the outcomes and the gaps that still exist, youth is still one of those, but we actually seen progress from 21 to 2025. We had 1% from 0 to 1. That's growth. But there's still other persistent gaps. We still see gaps from South County, where you still have about a 10% variance from census to representation. We still have very limited renters participating. And when you consider housing and the issues that it raises, it's important that we address those gaps. And we're also looking at even though it improved, we still have a significant gap in Latino representation in boards and commissions. So the work continues. The Board of Supervisors and the county have been extremely supported and committed in adopting the recommendations of the report, the most recent analysis that came up, which includes the Youth Commission, includes also just the outreach. There's a lot of education that makes this possible. Yes, the pathways for participation for youth, but for adults also, how do they know how it functions, how civic government functions, and what can be, in addition to be contributed? You know, the commission was one success. The county also passed a stipend program for people to be able to get funding to participate, because it's costly to take time off, you sometimes work or transportation or childcare, just to be civically engaged. So those steps from the county have been wonderful. We see that effort continuing. And also just looking at the collection of the data, never leaving out the data. Let's be mindful that this interventions, the identification of the youth gap, was data driven. It was informed from census to what we have. And I think our commitment is to continue to partner with the county to have a data driven evidence approach towards engagement in our civic government. And I think as voters and residents of this county, these are our commissions. And this is our Board of Supervisors. Let's make sure that we hold each other accountable, participate wherever we can to make sure that the impact we want to see is taking place.
All right. Unfortunately, we'll have to leave it there. 30 minutes can go by real fast when you're talking about something fun and interesting. So Dylan, Liz, Maria, I just want to thank you three again for coming on the show, talking about a really important subject and a new exciting opportunity for local youth here. So thanks so much for coming on Talk of the Bay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for
Thank you for having us.